From 150 million kilometers away, the sun radiates energy, and we receive that energy as heat and light. Green plants take the light and convert it into food, providing the many animals of the world with the energy they need to grow. The organism consumes an energy-rich substance. When a mouse eats grass, it gets energy. When a snake eats that mouse for lunch, the snake gets the energy that the mouse had. Eventually, the snake dies, and insects help the body to decompose. Each organism in this process has a name: producer, consumer, or decomposer. The producers make the food, the consumers eat the food, and the decomposers dispose of the waste. They're all part of the food chain. Here's how it works. It all starts with the energy from the sun, which is used by living organisms, the first link in the food chain. The next links of a food chain are the consumers. They're the organisms that eat the producers. These animals are taking in energy as they eat plants. They are consuming. Animals that consume plants are called herbivores. Like these zebras, herbivores are primary consumers. They get their energy directly from plants. Some animals hunt other animals in order to obtain energy. These meat-eating animals are called carnivores. This lion is a carnivore. It gets its energy by eating herbivores like this zebra. Because the lion's energy comes from the zebra and not directly from the plants, animals eat both plants and animals in order to obtain their energy. These animals are called omnivores. Even though all of these animals are eating different things, they are all consumers. Each one of them is getting a share of the sun's energy. The animals that hunt and eat other animals are called predators, and the animals they eat are called prey. All predators are carnivores, but not all carnivores are predators. Some creatures eat the leftovers that predators leave behind, or wait for animals to die, after which they eat the dead carcass. They are called scavengers. As we've said, energy is passed from the sun to the
scare you. Though some people think insects are yucky, they're actually very valuable animals. For example, these beetles, called dermestid beetles, can slowly eat the flesh off of bodies that are already dead. Now that is yucky. But these beetle decomposers are an important part of the food chain. Would you believe they can be very useful to museums too? You've probably seen animal skeletons in museums. They're so neat and clean they almost look like sculptures. But when the dead animals first come in, there's a lot of flesh on those bones. And cleaning the flesh off those bones by hand would be hard, messy work. So, bring in the beetles. The dermestid beetles eat the old flesh off the bones. Depending on the size and condition of the dead animal, this can take a week or longer. And most of the eating is done by the baby beetles, called larvae. The larvae look like maggots with lots of hairs. The beetles are so good at what they do that the people who work in the museum can't keep up with them. The cleaned bones have to be stored, waiting until there is time to put them together again as skeletons. So, the beetles in the museum do the same thing as other decomposers, such as bacteria, worms, and other insects. They break down the flesh, single-handedly taking care of all the messy work. It's yet another reason why decomposers, such as our dermestid beetles, are one of the most important parts of the food chain.
There are relationships between all living and non-living things in an area. Those relationships make up what is called an ecosystem. Each part of an ecosystem depends on all the other parts in that ecosystem for survival. Everything in nature has a place and serves a purpose in passing energy to other species through a food chain. Some food chains have more links than others. We've seen how food chains work on land. Now let's see how they work in the water. Animals that eat plants are consumed by larger predators, which become prey for still larger creatures. In the water, and especially in the ocean, there are tiny organisms called plankton. Some plankton are plants. These are called phytoplankton. These tiny one-celled phytoplankton contain chlorophyll just like land plants. That means they are producers because they can perform photosynthesis and produce food. Some plankton are tiny animals that feed on the phytoplankton. These are called zooplankton. Some of these tiny animals are the larvae or babies of larger animals like fish and shrimp. The tiny zooplankton become food for larger water-dwelling creatures, such as this butterfly fish, a secondary consumer. Small fish may become meals for larger fish, like sharks. It takes a lot of energy to support all of the animals in a food chain. There has to be an enormous number of small animals to support the larger animals that eat them. This is called an energy pyramid, and you'll soon see why. As we move up the food chain, we find that although the predators get bigger in size, they're fewer in number. At the top of the chain, the number of large predators, such as sharks and tigers, is relatively small in comparison to the large populations of smaller animals, like mice, that comprise the lower end of a food chain. If we counted the number of organisms that eat, as each organism is consumed, the amount of energy that is passed on becomes less and less. Organisms use up energy when they grow, move, or reproduce. That means that they can't pass on all of the energy that they consume in the form of food. Only about 10% of the total energy gets passed up from one energy level to the next. The pyramid shows that there are fewer big animals in the world than small animals. You cannot have more predators than you have prey. You cannot even have an equal number because soon there would not be enough food for the predators to eat and survive, and then they would die out. So far, we've looked at food chains, but food chains don't tell the whole story. They only show a small portion of the total energy flow. For example, this rabbit eats grass. Cows also eat grass, and this lynx eats rabbits. But lynxes are not the only animals to eat rabbits. Wolves also eat them. And both lynxes and wolves can have an ecosystem. It's a strange twist that in the quest to produce food, humans often cause long-term damage to the food chains and webs around them. When trees are removed from a rainforest to create farms, smaller animals lose their food source, and this causes a reduction in their numbers. This will mean less food for the consumers of these animals, and that will affect animals higher on the chain. Due to hunting, pesticides, and clearing away forests, humans can have drastic effects on the environment. Natural events, such as floods, droughts, and brush fires, can also change the natural balance through the loss of plants and small animals that are unable to escape the fires or floodwaters. Larger animals are often able to move to safer surroundings, but also often die if there's not enough food available to survive. By upsetting the balance between carnivores and herbivores, natural disasters can cause explosions in some animal populations and extinctions in others. Remember, any change in an ecosystem, whether it's the result of nature or the result of human activity, can have a devastating effect on food chains and webs. This is true with large animals and tiny ones. To continue on Earth, humans must use their intelligence to preserve the food-bearing cycles that nature has established. We can preserve plants and trees in wetlands and forests, which provide sanctuaries for the tremendous number of species of animals, as well as provide much of the planet's supply of oxygen. As you can see, It's important to know as much as possible about food chains, and you've learned a lot here. You know the food chain is made up of producers that transform sunlight into food. Energy is passed on when the consumers eat the plants and is again passed on as larger consumers, called predators, eat smaller prey. This process continues until the energy reaches the top of the food chain. What remains is reduced to basic elements, including substances like nitrogen and carbon dioxide, in order for the cycle to continue. A cycle that starts here. The Sun, the center of our solar system, is the ultimate source of energy for our Earth. The light from the Sun supplies energy for every living organism on this planet. Without the Sun's energy and the food chain, this would become this. The energy from this star is